And we're on. You're listening to WNHH 103.5 FM. LP. I almost said some other stuff. NewHavenIndependent.org. Sometimes I have to catch myself because I'm like, oh my goodness, I know this is where I am, but in my head, there's like other call letters running through. So I have to catch myself. Moving straight into the show. My longtime friend, John DeAndre, is in the studio with us, and we're going to talk about a couple of things this evening, this show. Impeachment, tolls, New Haven School Board, the controversial Hamden play, and today's goodbye to Denise DiCenzo. So, John, welcome to the studio. Thank you for coming back. Happy New Decade to you.
Yeah, Happy New Year and Happy New Decade. It's good to be back, Michelle.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you here. We were just joking about provisions, impeachment provisions in the Constitution. Now, you know, the language person in me, the kid in me is always thinking provisions. That means food.
Mm-hmm.
But in this instance, we're very far away from that.
We are.
And Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. The House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment. Article 1, Section 3, Clauses 6 and 7 from the U.S. Constitution state, the Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments. Now, when sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath or affirmation. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice, as we know, because we're seeing that now, is the presider or shall preside.
John Roberts, yes.
Yes, and no person shall be convicted without the occurrence of 2/3 of the members present, i.e. 2/3 vote, not just having them there,
Correct.
but them actually voting.
Correct.
Judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office, disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States, but the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. Article 2, Section 4. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. And that, John DeAndre, is the key, right?
Yeah, and you notice how I bolded
votes?
it and highlighted
Yes.
the key points in all
Yes.
three sections for you?
Yes.
So I want to watch The Young and the Restless, all right?
Victor Newman is not going through an impeachment. I can tell you that now. He'll buy out the Senate before he is convicted of
Especially
anything.
the Wisconsin senators.
Oh, yeah. It's my man. Love Victor. But now, these are the charges against the president.
Yeah, so take
The
it from
abuse
the top.
of power
Yeah.
and
Okay.
obstruction of justice.
Abuse of power and obstruction of justice. Let's look at the first act.
Okay.
All right. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. Read it for us.
The House of Representatives shall have the sole power of impeachment.
They
Now, what
did
does that mean?
They did it.
Okay.
They had their impeachment hearing. It went on for a few days. They rushed it before Christmas, and that was the key.
Okay.
They rushed it, had to be done before Christmas. And they came up with two articles of impeachment. One, abuse of power. The other, obstruction of justice. Okay. Their job is done.
Is done.
Then
so now it's the Senate's
They
turn.
brought the articles of impeachment to the Senate now. They didn't do that right away like they did
Right.
for Bill Clinton and I think Andrew Johnson,
Mhm.
the only two other presidents. They waited almost a month. Christmas vacation.
Right.
We got back from New
Right.
Year's. Then they had a long, dragged out procession. There was a ceremony of signing. And then the Senate got the articles. So now it's the Senate's job to have a trial. And that's what we've been going through
That's
for
what
the
we're
last
witnessing
2
now.
weeks. The House managers that move over to the Senate to provide their case, they did that for 2 days, 3 days. So
Mhm.
it's 24 hours
Mhm.
worth of hearings.
Right.
Now we're in the phase today, being Wednesday and tomorrow, Thursday, of questioning.
Okay.
And this is where John Roberts comes in because he's presiding. And we're going back and forth with questions to the House managers and then President Trump's defense people.
Okay.
They're asking questions. You have to write the question down. It's got to go to John Roberts. John Roberts reads the question. He decides which side answers first. So we heard a lot of that today.
Okay.
We're going to hear a lot of that
because that was going to be my
tomorrow.
question. What exactly is his role in this?
He's kind of like the moderator.
Okay.
Okay, so to keep everything
I've
in
heard
order.
him called that, yes.
All right, so tomorrow we have more questions. They're still going on as we're talking now. I'm not sure how long they're going to go. I think 2 8-hour days. I'm not quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so then on Friday, they're going to run the votes either way. They're either going to take the vote, which is their job,
Right.
okay, to either condemn the president or possibly acquit the president.
Okay.
Or, now here's where there's a shift in the paradigm of procedure, which is not in the Constitution. Bring in witnesses. You don't bring in witnesses in the Senate. You do all of that in the House.
Which they did.
Which they did, but now they want to bring more folks in, like John Bolton.
Yeah.
The Democrats want to hear John Bolton, some other people, and the Republicans are saying, well...
So is that legal? Can it be done?
Well, what does the Senate do? The Senate holds the trial. Okay? Technically, no. You're in procedural uncharted waters here.
Okay.
If I were teaching this, and I did to a degree for the first half of the year, we're now on to other issues.
Other things.
The answer is no.
It's not illegal.
It's not procedurally correct to bring in witnesses, whether they're Democratic witnesses or Republican side witnesses, because it's the procedure of the Senate to hold the trial and take a vote.
Well, now here's the thing, though. When most of us think of a trial, we think it does have some witnesses.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So how's this different?
All of that gets done during impeachment in the House. So the House
Senate
didn't thoroughly bring as many people forward. They brought the people I'm guessing that they felt that they needed to get the 2 articles of impeachment. Okay, now since then, and remember, a month almost goes by.
Right.
There's other folks out there. There's stuff that surfaces. Some is speculation. Some
other things are like John Bolton's book.
Right. Doesn't hold any bearing. It's a second read of somebody. Is it actually in the book? All of that. And all of that needed to be fettered out on the House side. So all the Senate's job is to deal with abuse of power and obstruction of justice as it's been presented from the House hearings. No new evidence, no new people coming forward on either side. They voted either to convict or not to convict.
Yeah.
That's the Senate's job.
Yeah.
So if they are going to, let's say on Friday, Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Senate, doesn't have enough vote, goes to take the procedural vote, and they want extra folks coming in to have additional hearings. That violates the procedure of the Senate. That's not supposed to happen. Here's what I would suggest. If John Bolton and Mary Jones and, Sam Smith are important, then they should have been brought up. And John Bolton's name was brought up before.
Right.
All of that should have been laundered in the House. Let's read the Constitution, which is a very short and tight document.
Right.
You see how tight it is.
Right.
Let's run the Constitution the way it's supposed to be run. Let's run impeachment, the way it's intended in the Constitution. If you feel that there need to be other witnesses, then bring Donald Trump up on some other charges in the House. Do another impeachment investigation, which they've already said they're most likely going
to do.
Okay.
Because of all of the other things that have come out. Yeah.
This is a procedural nightmare if you allow people now to come in and start testifying. When does that stop? on both sides.
On both sides.
So if you want John Bolton on the Democratic side, well, then why can't the Republicans call for the Bidens?
Yeah.
Well, it's not the Senate's job to do that. I'm reading it as a strict reading of the Constitution.
Okay.
So they're going to go in uncharted waters if they start calling in witnesses for testimony here.
Mm-hmm.
And this could go, who knows where this is going to go.
Well, I guess that's my question, right? Because if you have all of these witnesses before you take an actual vote, we could be waiting well past the election, right?
You have Iowa caucuses next week.
Right.
You have New Hampshire coming up. The Democrats have about 12 people
who are in the Senate
who have to whittle themselves down to a couple of candidates. This is now interfering with election 2020. And we know that this impeachment is highly politicized. It's been well documented. It's highly politicized. Now, what the president did, truthfully, does not, if you look at Article 2, Section 4, does not meet treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors. That's already been established by constitutionalists. However, that's not how the Democrats see it, because they brought up obstruction of justice, and the other one is abuse of power. Okay? These things that the president did, these conversations, probably are similar conversations in other times that presidents had on the phone with leaders. LBJ during the Vietnam War, Richard Nixon during the Vietnam War, maybe even Jimmy Carter. So, and the president's been very forthright. Not that I'm pro-Trump in here. The president's very forthright. He's handed over all of the information. The only thing is, he just doesn't want to be part of what he calls this ongoing, because there's been other things, the Mueller report and FISA and all that. Well, this ongoing witch hunt. There's people who contend it's playing out the way it should. The House did its job. They sent the articles to the Senate. They're holding the trial. They're in the question phase. Now it's time to vote it up or vote it down.
But now you don't consider what they've discovered so far as bribery. Why?
No, because I follow Senator Jordan.
Okay.
And he put these 4 talking points together, and I really hammered them into my head. Okay. The first one is, and I'm quoting him, the idea that we have the transcript of Trump's July 25th call with the Ukraine president, there was no quid pro quo in the transcript. That's been determined. Okay. By the people that actually were in the House hearings. Okay. There was no quid pro quo. You do for me, I do for you. The second thing was President Trump and the Ukraine president have repeatedly said that there was no pushing, no pressure, no linkage between the security assistance dollars and any type of investigation. Okay. All right. The Ukrainians didn't even know at the time of the call that aid had been held, and most importantly, they took no action. Okay. And the fourth thing, they never started an investigation. They never promised to start an investigation, and they never announced an investigation, the Ukrainians. They took no action to get the aid released. Okay? There was no quid pro quo. They got what they had to get. President Trump was fettering out corruption in Ukraine. Just happened to deal with the Bidens. And there is some
There's some conflict there.
Conflict there. That in of itself should be investigated by some sort of panel. I'm not sure who.
But they've already done that, and they didn't find anything outside of, it just looked bad. Well, it just looked bad to have him working when his father was vice president. Right. But for the most part,
I think it's Joe Biden's comments that they're really going after, where Joe, basically holds the line and says, look, you don't fire was the prosecutor, you're not getting the money.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the part where they're looking at. Never mind the money that the son got for not really being an experienced person for being on the board of Burisma.
Yeah.
That should be that needs to be looked at. Joe Biden's comments need to be looked at. So there was no quid pro quo, but yet we're going through the motions here. We're trying to keep hanging on. Like, what's the Supreme song? You keep me
hanging on.
No
just
witnesses.
Keep me hanging on.
We're in the Senate. Let the Senate do its job, which is what it's doing right now.
Yeah, it is.
And vote it up or down.
Well, I you and I are always going to disagree on this. First of all, I want to say hey to Bob McCormick. Bob McCormick's listening, and he said, realistically, I don't see Trump being impeached.
That is correct, most likely.
I think I agree with that because there's not going to be a 2/3 vote. I'd be very surprised if there were. Because at this point, it seems that no matter what this man does, the GOP will support him.
Right.
And so I believe that in just him saying, and granted, like you said, other presidents have done it. But I think the piece is, it's one thing to withhold funds until you do what I ask you to do politically.
Right.
It's another thing if it's personal. And here he is saying,
right.
Get me information.
It's not John Smith. It's the Biden.
It's the Bidens.
Right.
And he's saying, get me information on Biden and you'll get your money.
And that's where it gets sticky.
And that's where it gets sticky. Because even Obama has said, listen, if you don't do what I ask you to do, then there will be no meeting. And we get that. We understand that. That's politics. That's how they're played. In fact, you have, that's why you have a diplomatic corps.
Right.
Because the diplomats then come out and say, okay, this is what you need to do. We want to hear an answer from you in XYZ. And we come and we sit at the table and we map it out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get your meeting or you get your money.
Right.
But for me to ask a political leader, investigate the Bidens, and then get rid of someone who had been working in Ukraine,
the woman,
yes, to in corruption, and then dismiss her from her job,
right?
Because she is trying to prevent Rudy Giuliani, who I don't understand why he's in Ukraine on behalf of the president anyway.
You
he's
could argue that.
Personal lawyer. He's not a representative of the United States. The people have not elected him.
He's kind of become this self-appointed ombudsman, but
is
that
weird.
Gets to even on the local level of politics with the woman.
Yes.
Okay. And at some other point later in the year, we'll talk about Justin Elicker. When you go into office, okay, now I would imagine in federal office as president, you've got so many layers of people who are not your people.
Right.
It probably takes you 4 years to get them all out.
Yeah.
There should be some procedure to turn over people rapidly, because I know, just working for a mayor for 2 years, that we had folks that were working against us every single day. And I wasn't fully up to speed. And, going back now, hindsight's 2020, that we had people that we could have removed right away, but we sort of dragged our feet. Why? Because we were novices.
But isn't it also that folks are civil servants and you just can't necessarily
in some
bump
cases,
them? You can't bump them out.
But usually the foreign folk or the people representing us overseas are presidential appointments. Mm-hmm. All the mayoral appointments, all the gubernatorial appointments, all the presidential appointments. They should come up within the first 6 months of the person taking office, and they should try to get their folks in those positions that are not civil servant union certified jobs.
Right.
That's a whole other issue. Trump this is where Trump is kind of at a disadvantage, where sometimes he's at an advantage because he's a businessman and he's not a politician. This is where he's at a disadvantage. He's not a politician. He's not savvy enough.
Mm-hmm.
No disrespect here to the president, but he's not savvy enough to say, okay, all the people deep in the trenches that have been, have
appointed
served
by other presidents.
Yeah, that probably have been serving since Clinton, maybe, or even longer.
Yeah.
Let's move to get them out.
Yeah.
Okay. then that would the whole process with that woman could have been avoided. He had every right to let her go, whether he let her go when he did or whether he let her go back in 2017.
because you serve at the choice. You serve at the pleasure of the president.
And let me tell you, I have served at the pleasure of a state senator, and I served at the pleasure of a local mayor. So in that case, yeah. And in terms of Rudy Giuliani, he's an errant missile. But I'm looking at this, trying to look at it as a strict constitutionalist. What does the Constitution say? Because you want mucky and murky waters, then you start calling witnesses in the Senate, and then you are going in procedural questions, because this has not ever played itself out. And this is kind of lightweight stuff compared to what Bill Clinton and Andrew Johnson were impeached
on. Andrew Johnson was just out of his mind, I think. Right. Bill Clinton, that was a personal thing that had nothing. Yeah, that was ethics. But it had nothing. It did have something to do with his office.
Yes.
But it was more personal than it was political.
Yes. And Donald Trump, for the political animal he is not, he's a businessman. Right. Okay. He wants the job done. Look at the wall. He wants the job done.
Right.
He doesn't have the political savviness or the patience that other presidents have.
And I think the other piece in this for me, John, as well, is that, yes, you do serve at the pleasure of who is ever in charge. Right. But it's how you do it. If he wanted this woman out of office, instead of slandering her reputation because he wanted her out of office, he could have very easily called her in and said, you know what? I think that you've served us well, but I have somebody else in mind for the position.
There should be some sort of clearinghouse.
Yeah.
There should be, no matter who becomes president, there should be like the 6-month clearinghouse. Now, I don't know. I've never been to Washington. It may take more than 6 months.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
But there should be some sort of clearinghouse procedure. There shouldn't be anybody working against you or working for you that is not part of your team. Unless, again, civil service, you can't touch. But I know from even watching the gubernatorial stuff go on in Hartford and working in a mayor's office, there were people that we could have asked and we should have asked before they did stuff to us. Well, because we were novices, and you know what? You get busy in the day-to-day routine. Yeah. You forget about that person
trying to make it run
in another building within an agency within the town. That we do have control over that position. Why we have people that we could fill the position in. If I could go back 20 years and relive those 2 years, it would be a lot different. I would make different recommendations to the mayor. I wasn't even thinking of stuff like that.
Yeah.
So in Washington, it's got to be 100 times deeper.
Yeah, because you know,
got people overseas.
Most of the city works for the government.
You got people overseas that are working supposedly for you, not against you.
Right.
That, you can flip them. And, and do it with dignity. You're right.
As opposed to smearing your reputation and make you look bad after you've given all this service.
Today, I was listening in the car for a while, and I was listening, and John Roberts was moderating, and I was listening for the fact that, we got to hear John Roberts speak. Because,
I know, right? Because we never hear
the robes speak.
Right. The high 12.
Right. The nines.
The nines. I'm sorry. The nines.
So it's like, that was like historic to hear the Chief Justice speak.
Yeah, because that's what you listen for.
But he's got to be saying to himself, these questions have already been answered. They spent, I think, 24 hours last week.
Yeah.
I mean, it was monotonous. I turned it on after school at like 3 o'clock, and then I listened for a few minutes, and then at 9 o'clock at night, the same person is standing up there saying the same very thing. So I don't know who could watch it in its long form.
Yeah.
The ratings, ratings are down.
There ain't none.
I was watching it, and then I got home. I was listening on the radio.
In the car.
Yeah. Then I got home, and before I took my little nap or siesta, I was watching it on Twitter. There were 50 of us watching it. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm one of 50 people on Twitter watching this.
But part of it, John, too, is that the way the country is divided, I think both sides are saying, I'm not watching it.
Right. Vote it up or vote it down. Get it
I'm not
over.
watching it because I don't want to see it because it incenses people.
Yes.
People aren't watching it from the standpoint that, like you or I would watch it, a historic thing or,
Right.
I'm a witness to history or any of that. They're just like, listen, all of this is BS.
Right.
No matter what side of the fence you're standing on, and
it's damaging.
I don't want to see it.
It's damaging to both Republican and Democratic senators at this point for their campaigns. This whole thing is a political nightmare. You know what? Let's just have the election in November and see what happens.
Well, you know what? I really think that we are going to have a tightly contested race for president. But I will tell you this. I believe that you're going to see a lot of voter suppression, and that's another conversation. Okay. But you're going to see a lot of voter suppression. You're going to see a lot of people not being able to vote, which is voter suppression. But when I say that, I mean, for instance, you'll have people who maybe are new residents of the United States. They're not going to be able to vote. I think you're going to see a lot of young people who are not going to be able to vote. I think you're also going to witness either a very high or very low turnout, one of the two. And, because you have young people saying, well, what's up with this electoral college?
Right.
And why does it trump? Why am I going out to vote?
But yet the electoral college is going to
make the decision. When in reality, that's sort of not what it's supposed to do, but it has.
And we can talk about that once we have two candidates.
Yeah.
Right now,
yes, we'll talk about it.
I mean, we think we have one Republican candidate. We have no idea who the Democratic candidate's going to be. That's a whole other thing. So once we have the two candidates,
then we'll talk about electoral college.
You're right. We'll talk about the electoral college again, and also the voter suppression or voter depression.
Yeah. Yeah, I
mean, right now, last week I was getting wiped, and I would only listen to it 15 minutes at a time.
Right.
I was like falling asleep going, who could possibly be watching all of this? It was the same thing.
But see, and there's a difference to me, if you think about, and we were talking earlier, right? I have lived through Watergate. I've lived through the Clinton impeachment, right? So this is a whole different earth shifting on its axis type thing.
It's extremely politicized. On both sides.
But it was as well with Bill Clinton. Not so much with Watergate, because the Republicans were just as mad at Nixon.
Right.
As the Democrats were.
And he got out of town on a Saturday night in August.
Yeah, and he said, see ya.
Right.
Before you could convict me, even walk down this road.
The Clinton problem had more traction than this does. This is almost a veiled excuse to try to get Trump.
Well, here's the thing.
That's how I feel.
Here's the thing. Anytime that sex is involved, right? Salaciousness. You have a story, right?
Yes.
And it's the gift that keeps on giving. Because people are genuinely excited, if you will. Pardon the pun.
Right.
But, they want to, get the details and, hear about this.
And he had the charisma factor. There's a lot going for Bill Clinton that isn't going for Donald Trump.
That's true.
He had the charisma factor, the Big Macs.
And sex has not been a deterrent for Donald Trump.
Right.
Even though it became a part of his campaign, him and his sexual exploits.
Right.
Didn't make a difference.
Because he's a businessman, not a politician.
Maybe.
What do I think's going to happen? I think he's going to get acquitted. I'm hoping they don't.
I don't
call
think they're going to have
witnesses.
enough votes.
I don't think they're going to call. I pray they don't call witnesses, because that's where it's going to get really murky, and that's going to hurt every president after Donald Trump, that you can just
Why?
do what you want, not follow the Constitution, because the Constitution says the Senate holds the trial, votes it up or down, and that's it. Doesn't introduce anybody new on either side. That should be done in the House. Let the House start new impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump.
All right. So
That's what I think is going to happen. I don't
And
think
this
they're
is
going to have
where we
enough
are.
votes to bounce them out. Do you?
no.
No. I think
I'm-
that when the day is done, more is going to be said than done.
Mhm.
And we're going to be right back here next time I'm on, and President Trump is going to be the Republican candidate. And hopefully they'll at least narrow it down to 3 or 4 people.
Yeah, for the Democrats. So this is where we are right now. A trial is being held in the Senate. After that trial, senators vote on whether to convict the president or not. If it's less than 2/3 of the Senate vote, the president remains in office. If it's 67% or that 2/3,
Right.
he's removed from office and the vice president takes over.
Correct. So they're more than likely not going to get to that point. But in between today and tomorrow and that vote, there's the potential that they're going to start dragging people in. And
Yeah.
I hope they don't do that, because then you're getting into procedural murkiness that's not in the Constitution.
So Trump has been technically impeached.
He's been impeached.
He's been impeached by the House,
Correct.
as Bill Clinton was impeached by
in
the
his
House.
second term.
Yes.
And if he was impeached in his first term, he probably would have run for re-election
Election
again. He was
anyway.
still very popular.
Because the votes weren't there.
Right.
You know, and I don't think the votes are there to get Trump out. I would be very surprised. I think the nation would be very surprised. But I also don't know if the nation is ready for Pence to be president.
You know the devil you have. You never know the devil you're going to get, Michelle. In anything.
In anything, you know. So, and we know that Nixon,
The pressure was on.
the
Nixon. Yeah.
the pressure was really on. He knew that he was probably going to be put out of office.
Mhm.
The votes were there for him to go,
Mhm.
and the whole country. The country was not divided when it came to Richard Nixon.
No.
Let's just put that out there. I think most people wanted to see him gone
Right.
because they felt not only was he an embarrassment,
Mhm.
but he was not holding up the Constitution. And then he
There
had
was
told,
traction to what he did.
yeah,
there was
and
lots
then he
of
had told,
traction.
you know, he came out, you know, I'm not a crook,
Right.
you know, when in fact you were the
Right.
the leader.
Right. It's sad because that was a domestic issue, so to speak.
Right.
He
It
was a
had
pretty
nothing to
good
do
foreign
with-
policy president.
Well,
He
you know,
inherited
he
the
said,
Vietnam War.
Mm,
You know, he opened the doors to China. You know, he was a pretty good foreign policy person. He was probably I'm not a psychologist, but from what I've read, he had some deeply personal issues.
mhm.
And then his domestic issues completely imploded on
Well,
him.
you know, the thing was unemployment in this country was ridiculous when Nixon was in office. And to top it all off, we had a gas price crisis, which lent itself over a few years.
Right. Well, it rolled into Ford and then
Right.
Carter, especially.
Yeah.
Carter had to deal with the downwind of the Vietnam
Right.
post Vietnam War,
Post Vietnam
the
War.
depression, the psychological depression, and the economic almost depression. You
Yeah.
know, we remember we were filling up on certain days at
Right.
the gas pump,
Yep.
electric,
Yep.
keep the electric bills down, lower the heat, all that kind of
Walk
stuff.
around in your sweater in your house and some socks.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see exactly what comes out of the Senate over the next 2 weeks.
it's all very tiring. If you've watched it every single day, you've got to be exhausted.
I don't watch it. I listen to it when I'm at work, you know, and it's kind of serves as background noise when I'm dealing with customers. But for me, it does not have even what
The residents. The
yeah.
residents. You're right.
It's
Doesn't.
almost like
It's very veiled.
It's not only is it veiled, but it seems as if we're doing it to be doing it, and not necessarily because we've got something very serious that needs to be taken care of. Because it doesn't sound anything like Watergate.
There used to be a sign on somebody's office at the state capitol when I worked there. When all is said and done, more is said than done. And that's going to be the case here, even though they yacked for weeks.
So let's look at transportation, bringing it back to Connecticut. There's a vote set, or a hearing set, I should say, to decide whether we're going to take on tolls. The change is that lawmakers would be the ones to consider the rates and changes, not the Department of Transportation, which I find interesting. Plus, all the money from tolls would go to the Special Transportation Fund. So they would not divvy that money up. It's going to...
So that's a good thing. That's a good thing, because you know that
our roads
the
and
General
bridges
Assembly has raided the Transportation Fund over many years. However, the bad thing is the lawmakers would be the ones to consider the rates.
Which is ridiculous, right? I mean, really? What do they know about that? I mean, and it's not to take anything away from the research that's done, because you know how that works. You know, they send you to go tell John to do something else and get this research in here so that they can read it and study it and make decisions and look at what other states are doing and see if they're comparable in what they're trying to decide.
So there's 12 tolls right now on 6 state highways, and none of them, I believe, are right here in Greater New Haven, which is interesting. So they're going to meet on Friday. Now, I'm not sure if it's a public hearing or it's just a hearing, and then they're going to vote either Monday or Tuesday next week.
Well, it looks like it's more informational this time around.
So they're going to vote Monday or Tuesday next week, costing taxpayers money because they have to go in and do all this when the session for 2020 starts on Wednesday. So why not just do it
right during the session?
Opening ceremonies, or even do it Thursday.
Yeah.
Also today, Senator Fasano from North Haven was saying that there are rumors of sweet deals going around to get lawmakers to vote on this. In other words, such as I'm making this up, but let's say you know that bonding project that you want for your area. You know, we could probably get that on the bond agenda in April or May if you vote in favor. This. Yeah, he's implying that. He didn't call them sweet deals, but I'll call them sweet deals. It's arm wrestling. It's politics.
It's politics.
I mean, do we need tolls? We need something to help the infrastructure. And if tolls are it, and they're only going to be on trucks, and in 3 months from now, you're not going to pull a fast one and put them on cars, then so be it. But does the public really trust the state legislature, Democrat or Republican?
No.
Okay.
No.
So there's your...
And on top of that, though, John, I mean... we pay a lot of taxes right now.
I know.
We pay a lot of...
Look at your cable bill.
Don't even talk to me about cable bill.
Go fill up your tank.
Heck, get your nails and feet done. Get a mani-pedi.
I do need my feet done, but that's more information than we need to know. I'll have to check the bill.
But even now, getting your pet groomed.
Right.
You know, there's a gas tax.
That gas tax is huge.
There's a tax on you bringing your clothes to the cleaners.
Yes,
it's
there
like,
is. There's a sign at the cleaners effective January 1st.
What else can you tax us for?
Well, and then, be single and no dependents and look at your paycheck.
Yep.
That's the killer.
Really something.
Yeah.
So, it's all these things. And so when you start to talk about tolls, I don't understand why people don't see him as being a good idea.
Right.
I don't know whether, I guess, like you said earlier, a few minutes ago, people are concerned about eventually it will roll over to
the gotcha factor.
Yeah. It'll roll over to the resident.
Right.
And I just don't believe that we need another tax. We live in Connecticut. I go other places and people look at me like, you're paying tax on what?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, and there's more to come. Some people even see the plastic bag
That whole
dime
ordeal.
piece as a tax.
Right.
You know, when
I bought plastic bags.
well, you would.
I bought them in bulk online. So I have to bring my lunch to work. All right. I bought the plastic bags. They're nice full-size bags.
Are they reusable?
They are reusable.
Okay.
Yeah, I get four days out of them, and then I toss them.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
But I just think
it's a land
that,
of steady habits.
yeah, that's true.
When did the plastic bag become a problem? I guess my friends from the Connecticut Fund for the Environment would argue that. But we had
it
paper
has
bags.
been. Right.
And then we went to plastic sometime in the late 80s or 90s
Right.
because paper was costly.
Well, paper was not only costly, it wasn't lasting,
Correct.
you know, so it was the convenience of it.
Right.
But now, you know, when you start to look at what's going on in the world and you see pictures of turtles with
Yeah.
the you know, the
It's like the
plastic
plastic that
tops
held
growing
the,
out.
the
Yeah.
six-pack.
Right.
Remember the rings, you know,
Right.
it's in the
It's in the-
seagull's
right.
mouth.
And they can't get rid of it. And
Right. I understand that.
So
I covered
it's
many.
that piece.
We've covered
we
many
both
a
have
story.
covered many a story.
I get it.
Yeah.
But, you know, the whole money factor involved in it.
Well, you know, and that's Connecticut, right? We just gonna tax you for
Right.
every
Somebody
single
told me
thing.
that a local Chinese place charges like 10 cents for a bag. I mean, I bought the bags for grocery shopping.
Yeah.
The totes. You know, I bought
Yeah,
the totes.
I have those as well.
But, you know, for my lunch, I need I need a double plastic bag. I'm used to that. That's my OCD.
So
All right.
we're looking at them hearing arguments for tolls on Friday.
Correct.
So in New Haven,
Some changes.
some changes to the Board of Ed, or
Right.
continuous changes.
They
I
certainly
should
brought
say.
us drama in 2019. That
Yeah.
should have been a weekly show, the New Haven Board of Ed.
Well, it used to be. I don't know if CTV was covering these past few months, but
Well,
they used to cover the Board
certainly
of Ed.
stressful in June and July,
Yeah.
and then again in September.
Yeah.
So some leadership changes there. I'm not really connected as well as maybe you are. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or not, but the woman who is now the president, the former
Yesenia?
vice president, how do you pronounce her name?
Yesenia.
Yesenia Rivera
Mm-hmm.
becomes president. Darnell
Golson.
Goldson says he's had enough, and he's thinking about running for the state senate. I don't know where Gary Winfield's going. I mean, is Gary going somewhere else? Is he going to get a state appointed job? Did he even know that he would be having a challenger? I'd be curious to call Gary up. It's been a while since I talked to him. He might be on the floor laughing. I'm not sure. Maybe he's getting a state job that we don't know about.
We don't know about. Maybe there's an appointment.
Okay. I mean, would you actually come out and say,
But-
I'm thinking about running against Gary?
Yeah.
Gary's done a pretty good job.
Gary's a powerhouse. I think that's a very tough call. You know, I
I always referred to him as Bill Dyson's protege.
uh-huh.
So, and Bill
Which, you know,
Dyson was no
Yeah, he
no
wasn't no wimp at all. You know, he's my father's homeboy. In fact,
some other movement too. Ed Joyner as secretary. I'm not sure how these all play out, but I would imagine we're going to have a quieter, calmer, gentler Board of Ed.
yeah.
The new acting superintendent, what her name, Michelle?
Oh goodness, I do know her name, Eileen Tracy.
Yeah. So I mean, she seems to be.
She's a calming force.
Yeah, yeah. They
She's a
needed
calming
that.
force, and they needed that. I think this is a step in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see where it goes. I think right now what you're probably looking at is Elliker trying to find his way
Mm-hmm.
in so many departments.
Yeah, it
But
takes a while.
It's going to take a minute, but not only that, I think, again, it's bringing in your own people, bringing in your own tune.
Right.
You know, this is what I want done.
Right.
You know, and I'm sure there's some politics behind
Oh, yes, definitely.
all of this.
In other mayorships, when mayors took over, there were
Mhm.
other departments that will say we're on fire or bleeding.
Right.
In this situation, in 2020, this new mayor it's the Board of Education that the fire needed to be put out on.
Yeah, for sure. Because, I mean, you have teachers, you had administrators leaving in droves.
Bus issues.
Parents
not being treated fairly.
Yeah. And on top of that, money issues.
Right.
You brought somebody in to say, you got to find this deficit and plug it up. And when they come up with plans, board doesn't like the plans.
Right.
And parents don't like the plans.
Right.
So what do? It puts that person in a very,
and that part of it hasn't
against
gone
the
away,
wall situation.
But now let's see with the new superintendent and the board that they come up with.
Yeah, well, she's interim.
Right.
So I don't know how long she's going to be interim, because I really think parents in the town are fatigued with not only a superintendent search,
right,
but now we've had two new superintendents in a 4 or 5 year period. And the other piece in that too is that you have to honor their contracts.
Correct.
So, that's big money.
Burks got out of town, but not without some cash.
And neither did Harry's.
Right. So maybe she stays around. She makes a commitment for a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, she's someone who
in the system.
That anyway. Helps. And people know her.
Right.
And so
I think there's a genuine respect for her from what I've read.
Yeah. So, that brings a calming factor within itself. So once that gets a little bit more even, then we'll deal with budget issues and all those sort of things. But of course, it has to move quickly.
Right.
It has to move quickly. So you're listening to the show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and NewHavenIndependent.org. We're also streaming live video on Facebook Live. Just go to facebook.com/New Haven Independent, or just go to your Facebook page and look us up. John DeAndre is in the studio with me, Michelle Turner, as we go through a couple of topics for the week. So, in looking at changes and talk about education, the Board of Ed in my old hometown, they never quite get it right. You talk about going from
the frying pan into the fire.
Not only frying pan into the fire, but from money and politics to just plain old race. I'm a Hampden student. Okay. I went to Newhall Street School. I was one of the next to the last classes that left Newhall Street in 6th grade. I am a Michael J. Whalen alum. I am a Hampden High alum. I was also president of the Black Student Union.
During the riots?
Yes, during the riots. And we fought. We stepped out and we argued because of things like this incident. So now I'm, almost 40 years graduated high school. And we're still seeing the same sort of things. I mean, I had a teacher say to me and another classmate, because to have more than 5 black kids in a class was, and I tell people all the time, 714 people in my graduating class, because Hampden only has one high school. Out of that 714, maybe 720, 45 were black in my senior class. One guy decided he would stay back because he was over at what was then the orphanage. So he didn't want to lose his services. So he stayed back. So 44 kids that were black that graduated out of 720. Okay. My classmate and I were in an AP, what's considered an AP.
Accelerated
program, anatomy, physiology, which I loved up until this point because I was learning a lot and, human body, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And my teacher says, so tomorrow we're studying the anatomy of the foot. And Wayne and Michelle will take their shoes off and we'll see just how flat their feet are. I think, John, that was probably the first time in my whole life of going to school that I skipped a class. Because I love to learn. Plus, you know, if you're the kid of teachers,
Right.
you ain't going to skip class.
Right.
That's not,
Right.
you know, that's not where my head was. Talk to either one of my sisters, they got a different approach.
Right.
But my approach was, it just wasn't worth it to me. But imagine that one statement from that one teacher in a class of 22 kids.
Right.
And so you multiply it with something like this.
So what happened was they staged a role play, a triangle of trade, the colonial slave trade in a class.
And it was going to be a play. And it had characters like King Babu and colonial slave traders who justify their participation in the slave trade. Not only that, it was the same week as King's birthday.
Yes, you're right.
And so they had a parent who spoke up at the Board of Ed meeting because her daughter was chosen to be an enslaved African.
Right. They had enslaved African 1, enslaved African 2.
Now, I will tell you what my friend Babs Rawls Ivy did. Same thing, private school, chose her son to be a slave. And you will get this and you will crack up. She had him come in as Nat Turner.
Okay.
Because you undo some slavery,
Right.
then let's look at the other side of it. You know,
Right.
I see you.
Right.
But I just, there's so many different ways. And you know also that there's very different ways that you could have done this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could have shown memorabilia, if you want to call it that, right?
Well, the History Channel has plenty of stuff.
Of stuff. And you could have shown films. You know, there are pictures of different slaves and the tools they used to keep them in place and all these type of things. And if you wanted to talk about an auction, there's plenty of stuff that you could have used. But to do a play where there's an auction and black kids are being sold, and like you said earlier, there were people who did these things in the 70s and the 80s. And while nobody complained, it didn't make it right.
Correct.
You know, and I don't know why people didn't complain.
Right.
But, you know, I think we're at a point of heightened sensitivity because people just want the stuff to stop. Right. Just stop.
Right.
You know, and no matter what your intent is, like, does this teacher have an intent? Probably not.
Right.
Is she racist? Probably not. But
poor judgment calls.
Yeah, but she should have also known that you don't have a play where you put black kids in to be slaves. Not in this day and time.
No. There was a better way to handle it.
There was a better way to do it.
Again, it falls under our constant conversation about him.
Yep. And the district always has an issue when it comes to handling race. Mm-hmm. It's just always been that way. You know, I had a teacher, and my father, National Science Foundation scholar, I am horrible in math to the point where I am horrible. Even my own father wouldn't tutor me, okay? And that's a big deal. But my father was determined that I would attempt to learn something in that process. And I had a teacher who put me out every day because he was so frustrated with me. He sent me out and he sent me to the guidance counselor's office. And my father was like, "Where's your math homework?" I said, well, the teacher put me out. He was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I'm not calculating stuff the way that he thinks I should. And I keep getting stuff wrong. So he puts me out. My father said, when is your class? My daddy showed up at Michael J. Whalen in his three-piece suit and his tie.
And that was the end of that.
And that was the end of that. And him being department chair of a high school mathematics department.
For a long time.
For a very long time. So, you know.
We will never stop talking about Hamden. There will always be an issue, it seems. They've got a long way to go, and I don't know why.
And I don't know why.
I don't. And I worked there for 2 years, and that stuff wasn't really bubbling up in those 2 years. Mm-hmm. We had other issues, but I'm sure it was there.
You know, and one of the people that I saw comment was Nancy Hill.
Mm.
And she, too, grew up in Hamden. But her father was one of the first black principals in Hamden.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked about not only what her dad went through, but what she went through as a student.
It's just generational.
And it just seems that some way, somewhere, somebody has to sit somebody down and say, enough of this.
There's a disconnect somewhere.
And I mean, just as we thought, I mean, you probably remember, but what we went through in that year when we had the riots and then kids came to our side of town through our neighborhood and beat somebody up who had nothing to do with it. You know, on one hand, there was a white guy that was beat up under the Merritt Parkway severely, and it was a mistaken arrest. They arrested someone who didn't do it, but because he was black, and trust me when I tell you, they look nothing alike. Then the night after, or maybe even the same night, I can't remember which, but there was a young girl who was walking home, and some white males who went to Hamden High jumped out of a car, beat her up, broke her arm in retaliation. So now this thing really escalates, right? John, it took us all year. And there were certain things we asked for, we got. But to see it come back in the classroom, you know, where a lot of stuff had started in the first place, was just, this is incredible to me.
There's some sort of disconnect, Michelle. I don't really know what it is, but it is just a continuing problem.
And it's one of those things where the teacher, you know, they're saying that her computer, the district's computer system was down because of a computer virus. And the teacher was using the play as an alternative to what had been planned. And so consequently,
it was an egregious mistake on the teacher's part. And it just adds to the ongoing label or moniker that the town gets. I mean, it just can't get out of its own way when it comes to this stuff.
All right, real quick. Yes. Denise DeCenzo.
Ah, poor Denise.
You know, very sad.
That was awful.
It was very sad.
Young. And just a genuinely nice human
person.
Being.
They
memorialized her today at the Connecticut Convention Center in Hartford. From what I could see, the few clips I saw before coming in, you know, it's a really nice job. I felt awful for days after that.
Yeah, I think we all did, you know, because in some way, shape, or form, you know, we all communicated with each other. And, you know, every time she called me for something to verify or anything that ELI had when we were working at ELI, she was the most pleasant. She was the most nicest person.
Genuine, nice human being, and just struck down too soon.
Too soon.
Connecticut's loss.
Big time. big time. And I'm glad that, people have taken the time out. I think with one thing that we've learned with Denise DeCenzo and Kobe Bryant is that
the sweet
this
Kobe
life,
Bryant.
this life is fleeting.
Mm-hmm.
Love your people. Say you love them.
If you
Talk to
believe
them
in
as
God,
much
thank God every
Thank
day
God
you,
every day
you woke up.
that you woke up. That is the truth. And, don't take all of this lightly. It means something. It means something. So you've been listening to the show. WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We're streaming on TuneIn, independent.org, streaming live video on Facebook Live. Thanks to Harry. Thanks to Bob McCormack for listening. And listen, do not patronize that pizza shop on Whaley Avenue, 407, I believe it is Whaley Avenue. Took my daughter 2 hours last night to get a free pizza. So I had to say that. John DeAndre, thank you so much for being here.
Glad
Appreciate
to be
your
here.
time and energy.
Anytime.
Thank you, Harry. This has been the show. Well, the mics are down, but, we're still on Facebook.